You know, definitely one of the things to do before I die was attend the Cannes Film Festival in the south of France. I can't imagine why I would want to go there, whether it's the sprawling beaches, the food, the women, but really it's just because of my love of cinema. We have had yet another Cannes Film Festival wrap up, and there are some pretty heavy implications into the upcoming award season, which of course I need to get off my chest. All right, guys, welcome back to the garage. Gerald here with you. The 78th annual Cannes Film Festival just wrapped up this past weekend, and it gave out all of its prizes on Saturday. On this video, I wanted to kind of cover the winners, but that's been done, and you could look that up on Google, frankly. So what I really want to do is give you my opinion on if I think any of these winners, or perhaps any of the movies that did not win, but were in heavy rotation at water coolers in Cannes, France, could be prominent in the upcoming award season, which would of course culminate in the Academy Awards in March of 2026. I did update my predictions after the results of the winners from Cannes, and that will be available in my next round of power rankings, which will probably come out the first week of June here on the channel, but I do update it frequently on my website, so you can check that link below if you would like to see the written predictions before they're official here on the channel. Let's start with the Big Bang, the number one prize that they give out every year, which of course is referred to as the Palme d'Or. This is a illustrious award that the Cannes Film Festival has been giving out for multiple decades, and they also give out kind of a second place and a third place as well, but the Palme is the pinnacle. Last year, of course, going to Anora, Sean Baker's film that was distributed by Neon Studios. And one thing I want to point out, which is also going to somewhat apply to this year's winner for the Palme, is that Neon has acquired the last 6 Palme d'Or winners, which is frankly absolutely mesmerizing. They are on a all-star, unbelievable, record-breaking run at the Cannes Film Festival. It's truly phenomenal. And not only that, and one thing I want to make sure you keep in mind when you're critiquing my predictions, which of course people do no matter what, they did it with Anora last year too. 4 out of those 6 years, of course, we don't know what's going to happen with this year yet. So we'll just say 4 out of the last 5 years, the Palme winners for Neon Studios have also gone on to receive a Best Picture nomination and be very prominent at the Academy Awards. Needless to say, if you are a film in competition at the Cannes Film Festival, you probably want to take a meeting with Neon Studios. They added to that illustrious, impressive resume this year at Cannes when the Palme went to a film called It Was Just an Accident, an Iranian film from Iranian filmmaker Jafar Panahi. If I'm mispronouncing that or any of the other names in these international films on this video, I truly apologize. I often have trouble pronouncing American names, if I'm being honest with you. Looking at the Letterboxd description, it says night driver Ingbal en route with his pregnant wife kills a dog. Stranded, he seeks help. Unaware, his rescuer believes him to be the prison officer who tortured him many years before. So this sounds like a pretty tangled web here and a pretty dramatic, hefty story that could lend to a lot of great opportunities for a filmmaker to make an impression. Not only that, Panahi has been arrested and imprisoned multiple times for basically making movies that went against the Iranian government or against their better wishes. He continues to make films, including with A Simple Accident. Now, the key thing about this film, It Was Just an Accident. Do I think it is an Oscars player coming off of the success of the Palme d'Or? I've already said it. I said this on a previous video. It did not matter what movie won the Palme this year at the Cannes Film Festival. If that was also a movie being distributed by Neon Studios, I was going to put it in my Best Picture predictions. I'm going to stand by that until it's evident that it's not going to happen. So right now, It Was Just an Accident is absolutely going to be one of my 10 nominees for Best Picture at the Oscars. I'm going on that very, very simple trend, but like I said, with this being the 6th year in a row that Neon has acquired the Palme winning film, if this one goes on to be nominated, that will be 5 out of 6 times that it also received a Best Picture nomination. The only one that did not receive it was Julia Ducournau's Titane, and let's be honest, that is a film that even with the success of a movie like The Substance is way too freaky and way too abstract and artsy for the Academy. However, the premise and the stills and images that I've seen from It Was Just an Accident does not seem un-Oscar-y to me. It does seem like a very well-made, easy-to-follow narrative that, based on the plot, would lend to the Academy's sensibilities. Therefore, there's no reason for me to think that it would be excluded at this point. I also definitely think it is a strong, even stronger player for the International Feature nomination. And I'm not doing those predictions quite yet, but I can't imagine that this one would not be in the mix a few months down the road. And the last couple of things I want to point out in this kind of resume builder are some scores and some critical acclaim that the movies have received from folks that were there in attendance at Cannes this year. It Was Just an Accident, for example, on Rotten Tomatoes is at a 100%, and that's with 17 verified critic reviews. Obviously, you can't get much better than that. The Letterboxd curve from everyone that went to Cannes that decided to review the film on Letterboxd, which I assume would be most people at this point, is a 3.9 out of 5, which is also a very strong score for something that would end up being in the Oscar conversation. Grand Prix, or essentially the runner-up for the Palme Award, went to Joachim Trier's film Sentimental Value, starring Renate Rosva, a duo that worked together in a very successful Cannes film a few years ago called The Worst Person in the World, but for some reason was shut out of the major top-of-the-line categories at the Academy Awards, despite being one of the best films to release that year. So I had Sentimental Value in my mind, on my radar, all the way back in March, like the week after the last Academy Awards aired, and it's been in my predictions ever since for the last couple of months. So the question is Sentimental Value, also from Neon, by the way, going to stay in my top 10, even though I'm putting It Was Just an Accident into the top 10 for the first time? And the short answer is yes. The reason being, even though it did not win the Palme this year, the conversation and the chatter around the film is extremely positive. Most people that I follow on Twitter and other social media said that this was their best viewing of the festival and that it lived up to the hype, which is a bit more impressive, or at least equally as impressive as It Was Just an Accident, because sometimes it's hard to live up to the hype and to succeed what people think you're going to end up being and then to still be that. And it sounds like Sentimental Value was. And not only that, but some people saw Ronsva and the movie The Worst Person in the World as being a bit of a snub in their Oscars year. So this could be a bit of redemption. And of course, the international voting body has grown since a few years ago when that film was eligible. You also have tremendous accolades being rained down on supporting performances like those of Elle Fanning and Stellan Skarsgård, specifically for supporting actor. Those are two actors that I think their due is coming. Elle Fanning was actually on my top 30 under 30 list of actors that I think could be nominated in the next 10 years, and it could be this year with Sentimental Value. I think an even stronger case can be made for Stellan Skarsgård, who is a bit of an industry veteran. The film also has a movie or a filmmaking tie-in, as Skarsgård plays an elder filmmaker, and Ronsva is one of his daughters, who I think he's trying to coax into being in a film that is inspired by their estranged relationship. So it sounds like a very dramatic, juicy role for both of them, and it has that Hollywood tie-in, and the Academy loves movies about making movies, and it sounds like there's going to be a little bit of faux filmmaking inside of Sentimental Value. Now, of course, I have not seen it, and a lot of folks have. However, that's the impression that I'm getting, and that does speak Academy friendly to me. So I am going to leave it in my 10 currently for Best Picture. What actually might end up happening is if it's the Titane route for It Was Just an Accident, that one might be an international player, but it might not be strong enough word of mouth wise or push wise from Neon, depending on what they decide to push here, to get into the Best Picture nominees. If Neon Studios really gets behind Sentimental Value, which despite not winning the Palme from the jury there, it still has probably more notoriety and more people are familiar with the title and the actors in the film, that it could be a little more popular among Academy voters. So if that happens, Sentimental Value might stay in my 10, while It Was Just an Accident, even though it was the Palme winner, may drop out of my 10 but remain in heavy rotation for possibly international feature. Right now, I'm leaving both of them in because I don't really know what Neon's play is going to be. With that being said, we're not going to discuss the life of Chuck in depth on this video because it did not compete at Cannes, but I think movies like that from Neon Studios are out of the mix because now they have two really strong, really actually more than that, we'll get into it here in a second, but they have at least two films here with an international flair that are going to be very strong competitors for the Academy Awards, that I think films like The Life of Chuck, while they may still have some players in the mix like Mark Hamill for supporting or adapted screenplay for Mike Flanagan, as a whole, I think movies like that in the Neon catalog, especially with those early release dates, may suffer the consequences of that. But I think sentimental value is going to be in the conversation all the way through to next January when the nominees are announced. And lastly, in looking at Rotten Tomatoes for sentimental value, 22 reviews, it's at a 95%. It looks like perhaps there was one review, maybe two, that were not positive on that. I think one of them was actually my buddy Dan, if I'm remembering correctly from the podcast episode of Next Best Picture, or maybe that was Die My Love. I can't remember, but if that was him, I'm going to have to sit this guy down to talk to him. But nonetheless, 95 is a very, very good score. And also, Dan, I'm kidding. If that was you, I want you to speak your truth, brother. And then over on Letterboxd, it has a 4.0 on the Letterboxd curve, which is among 23 people at Cannes that saw the film. Sentimental value, I think, is going to be a huge player, whereas a movie like It Was Just an Accident could be a player for Best Picture and International, but not a lot else. Which sounds like what? It sounds like I'm Still Here from last year from Brazil, where it was a player in a couple of categories, but not across the board. And that could be a similar situation for It Was Just an Accident, but I do feel very, very strongly that the success of that film winning the Palme is not necessarily going to hurt the chances for a film like Sentimental Value, even though they are being pushed by the same studio. The jury prize was a tie. It went to The Sound of Falling and Surat. This prize is essentially third place for the Palme. It's kind of like the most original film or most original story, if you will. I don't know really a whole lot about either one of these movies aside from things I've been reading from folks that saw it at the festival. I know The Sound of Falling is a very sprawling, epic, dramatic film, almost like an anthology where it follows multiple eras of women's journeys and how they kind of intersect. Whereas I think Surat is a film about a father and a brother trying to find their lost daughter and sister in the desert of, I think, Morocco or some international land like that. I don't think necessarily either of those films are Oscar players, although I did recently put The Sound of Falling into my top 20 for Best Picture possibilities. It was on my radar back in March, but I just don't know that the film is going to have the push that it necessarily needs to get all the way to Oscar nominations morning. And one interesting thing to point out about The Sound of Falling is a lot of times the distributors in the US for these films will lend to the nominations that they end up receiving based on who they really decide to push the most during award season. The Sound of Falling was picked up by Mubi, who is quickly becoming the next Neon or the Neon in waiting at the Cannes Film Festival. Last year, of course, they had wildly amazing success with The Substance as it went on to win hair and makeup at the Academy Awards and received some pretty illustrious nominations, of course, including Best Director, Best Picture, which was shocking for a horror movie, especially a body horror film. And of course, all the way to the last second, we didn't know who was going to win lead actress, as they had a nomination in there for Demi Moore as well. I'll get to where I think Mubi is going to have its greatest success at the upcoming award season, but I don't want you to count out The Sound of Falling because it does sound very Oscar baity, and it does have a pretty prominent up-and-coming studio in Mubi behind it. We know that they are successful with their campaigns after seeing what happened with The Substance last year, which was one of the most non-Oscar films I've ever seen, and it went really far during award season. Just to wrap up on the awards that were handed out on Saturday, Best Director went to The Secret Agent, which is a film from Brazil. Hang on to your hats, Brazilians. I'm going to most likely mispronounce this name, but the director is Kleber Mendoza Filho. I did that pretty good, I think. I feel pretty good about that pronunciation, I gotta be honest. The Secret Agent stars Wagner Moura, which was not an actor I was really super familiar with before like a year ago when he was in the movie Civil War, which ironically happened to be one of my favorite movies of 2024, which got no Oscar love. And Wagner Moura also won the Best Actor prize for this same film, The Secret Agent. So this movie got two really prestigious prizes at the Cannes Film Festival, which honestly is super rare. They usually spread the love around. Even they've gone so far as to, even with movies like Emilia Perez, when am I going to be able to stop mentioning that movie on these videos? But they even went so far as to give out ties to actresses in that film so that they could all win at Best Actress as opposed to just Gaston. So Wagner Moura is not currently in my 5 for lead actor. However, he did shoot up into my top 10. So he is in my near misses right now, and we will wait to see if this is a Fernando Torres situation where the love for this movie and the international push And frankly, the kind of word of mouth that Brazil was able to create in the grassroots kind of love for I'm Still Here shows up again. This is a story that is, I think, somewhat similar, at least based on what I've read on paper. It happens also in a different era, but it also happens during the Brazilian dictatorship, which also followed Torres and her story in that film. So I do think Brazil, which makes me so happy to say because I have a lot of viewers in Brazil, but I think that that movie is going to be an international feature next year. I absolutely do. And not only that, I think it could easily be in the Best Picture conversation. Again, it's going to depend on how much it speaks to and how easily it is reached here in the US. So if they grab this movie and they push it, which also is movie, by the way, then we could be in for some pretty dramatic stuff coming out of Brazil for the second year in a row. And also, I think they could ride the momentum of I'm Still Here because that was a really impressive run for that film. On Rotten Tomatoes, The Secret Agent is sitting at a 96% with 23 verified reviews. And over on LETTERBOXD, the curve is a 3.7, which is a little lower than some of the other players in the mix. But again, I think the Brazilian factor, Wagner Moura also receiving an award for this film, has got it off to at least a head start in the international category. But I also think you have to kind of have it in your mind for Best Picture based on what we saw with the international voting members and how well lifted up a movie like I'm Still Here was last year. So I do have it in my top 20 for picture. I've got Wagner Moura in my top 10 for lead actor, and we will see how it goes as it moves along. But I tell you what, I am pulling for Brazil. So there were some other prizes handed out at the ceremony on Saturday, but none of the ones that were handed out I'm specifically including in my predictions or near misses or on the radar. I could be wrong, of course, but at this point as I'm sitting here, I don't think any of those other winners will show up in the Academy Awards conversation other than the ones I just mentioned to you. However, I do want to point out a few films that did not win any major prizes that I do think you need to have on your radar for the Academy Awards season. I'll start with Lynn Ramsey's Die My Love. And the reason I am starting with that one is because I have currently shot that movie all the way up into my top 10 for Best Picture. These power rankings will be out in about a week's time, maybe 10 days or so. But it was in my top 20 before. This is the project that I think Mubi is going to really get behind and push, much like they did with The Substance. This is by no means a body horror film based on everything I've read about it and the scenes and stills I've seen from it, but it is a very kind of psychological, mentally focused film that could be a hard watch, and I don't know if that's the right term to use, but it could be a very challenging watch for a lot of members. And Lynn Ramsey's kind of known for that, and frankly, I love that style of filmmaking, and it looks like we're into the same category with Die My Love. The main thing here is I've heard not just one or two, but several people that I trust, and some people I'd never even heard of, but were at Cannes, saying that this is the best performance of Jennifer Lawrence's career. And that immediately puts this movie into the conversation because she is an Oscar darling. It's been about 10 years since the movie Joy came out, which would have been the last time she really had any awards chatter. But prior to Joy, every movie she put out, really starting with her first one, Winter's Bone, received some Academy chatter. She's always in the conversation, multiple nominee, and of course a previous winner for the Lead Actress Academy Award. I think much like on the same kind of beats as a Demi Moore nomination for The Substance, the movie gets placed under a spotlight because of this tremendous out-of-body performance that we may be getting from Jennifer Lawrence. You also have a powerhouse young actor in Robert Pattinson in a supporting role who is not in my 5 right now, but I did recently put him into the 10 after the Cannes Film Festival. He is like my 9 or 10 right now, near miss for supporting actor also. But he's an actor that everybody adores and admires that's also never really received the Academy recognition that he deserves. Could it be for this movie? Yes. And Lynn Ramsey, conversely, for director also could finally receive some notoriety for her filmmaking. But basically, the easiest way to equate it for you guys that follow me or trust me is I think that Die My Love is going to be the Mubi player this season. You have other movies like The Secret Agent and like The Sound of Falling that will also be in the mix, especially when you're talking about international feature. But when it comes to an 75 to 80% voting body that's in the States, and it's a film that includes very, very well-known actors among many age groups and many demographics, like Pattinson and Lawrence. And then you also, by the way, have some really heavy power players from the Academy's perspective in Sissy Spacek, a previous winner, and Nick Nolte is also in this film, a previous multiple nominee. So you have old Hollywood and you have new Hollywood, and you have a filmmaker that is well regarded, and the reviews have been pretty good for this thing, with a lot of people saying it's really kind of wild and it's hinged on that performance of Jennifer Lawrence. And I think she's going to actually end up hurting the chances for somebody like Rose Byrne from a film called If I Had Legs, I Would Kick You, because I currently have her in my 5 for lead actress, but possibly Jennifer Lawrence gets that kind of tortured mother performance over somebody like Rose Byrne, because they sound very similar, kind of like a psychological thriller version of Night Bitch from last year. And by the way, I loved Amy Adams in that, and I thought she should have been nominated. So I love these type of performances, and with Jennifer Lawrence just having a child in real life, that probably did a lot for the life imitates art kind of performance that she gives in Die My Love. I am over the moon ecstatic to see this film, but I currently have it in my 10 for Best Picture, and I also very, very recently put Jennifer Lawrence into my top 5 for lead actress. She was a near miss when I did my initial predictions. As of right now, she's in that 5. 33 reviews, so more than any of the other ones we've talked about so far on Rotten Tomatoes, but Die My Love is sitting at an 85%, which is obviously still a very, very good score, but it is also the lowest one that we've discussed. On Letterboxd, it's a 3.5 curve. So again, the lowest of the ones we've discussed, but a 3.5 is not a bad score on Letterboxd. In comparison, The Substance has like a 3.2, I believe, on Letterboxd. So you can see kind of the disparity there, and it's not anything to really get worried about unless it drops below like a 3, because then I start to have pause on how successful it would be across the 10,000 plus members of the Academy. Right now, I feel really good about it. It's in my 10 for picture, and Lawrence is in the 5 for actress, with Pattinson creeping around that supporting actor conversation as well. I did want to touch real quick on Eleanor the Great by Scarlett Johansson, her first film where she's been the director. She doesn't star in the film. It stars June Squibb. This is a movie that I think could still get June Squibb some Oscar attention for lead actress, but I do fear that its success for Best Picture or being in the nominees could be in trouble after some of the reception from the Cannes Film Festival. While it was generally positive, it does have a 50% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is a rotten score, and if you remember, I said anything when it drops below like a 65 or a 70, it's not looking good. So a 50 is not great. That's only with 18 reviews, and obviously it has not been released to the general public yet. So we'll see if that score goes up or how, which direction the winds kind of blow there. But with June Squibb's performance, most people have been very, very positive on it. With her age and with her lineage in Hollywood and her success in the past with the Academy, I do still feel good about her being in the mix for lead actress, but I don't feel nearly as good as my kind of premonition was early on for this film for Best Picture. Speaking of directorial debuts from actresses, how about Kristen Stewart's first film called The Chronology of Water? This is also a fever dream or dream-like setting, very similar to what a Lynn Ramsey sounds like she would do, where Kristen Stewart's telling a genuine story with a brilliant performance from Imogen Poots, who is an actress that has also not received nearly enough awards attention, in my opinion. This film, I don't know. You could be looking at actress, you could be looking at screenplay. Most films that I feel the best about coming out of Cannes are where it's overwhelmingly positive, and I have seen some people be like, what the hell was that? And then some people be like, oh my God, that was amazing. So those kind of divisive middle down the road things I don't feel as good about, but I do think there's still a possibility. It currently sits at a 90% on Rotten Tomatoes out of 21 reviews from folks that attended the Cannes Film Festival. Now, it pains me to say this, but one that I think you can squarely take out of any possibility for predictions is Ari Aster's Eddington. This is one that I had in the mix as an early on-the-radar film, but after seeing the Cannes reactions to them, I don't feel really at all good about it. It sounds like it's a little bit more of a Beau is Afraid type Aster, which is a very challenging thing for the viewer, and Academy members are probably going to get pretty weary of the way the film drags on. It does have a 67 on Rotten Tomatoes, and that's with quite a few reviews. 46 was the most that we've seen yet coming out of Cannes. Stars a pretty powerhouse performance from Joaquin Phoenix, I've heard. But I've also heard that some of the supporting performances, which are huge names in the film, are considered wasted or underused at best. Performers like Emma Stone, Austin Butler are just underused in the film, even Pedro Pascal. So that has me worried a little bit. And it does sound like it may be a little heavy-handed in its messaging and a bit of a slog in terms of the general viewing audience. So I do not think Eddington is going to continue very much deeper into award season, which, like I said, is sad for me to say. Another one that's on a similar trajectory to Eddington, in my opinion, is Julia Ducournau's Alpha. I mentioned Titane earlier, which of course won the Palme, but didn't have a lot of success during the award seasons here in the States. And I think we could be on a similar path for Alpha, which also disheartens me because I love her fearless style of filmmaking, the fact that she's a female filmmaker. But Alpha just sounds like it's too far out there, too slow paced as well, is what I've heard. It just kind of drags along to a pretty uninspired climax, which is, I'm sorry to hear. I have no doubt that it's going to be a brilliant visual type of film, but I don't expect it to have any notoriety during award season, especially if a film like Titane couldn't receive a lot of accolades. I don't see Alpha, which underperformed at the Cannes Film Festival, as doing anything either. But I will say that Julia Ducournau is one of the most exciting filmmakers that we have, and one of these days she will be at the Academy Awards in a very prominent fashion. I just don't think it's going to happen for Alpha, unfortunately. You also had The History of Sound from Oliver Hermanus premiere. That's a movie that stars Paul Mescal and Josh O'Connor as two men who are photographing the war, and they end up developing a romantic relationship. It's been compared to movies like Brokeback Mountain and this kind of forbidden affair that these two men have. It sounds very intriguing, and you would think it would be very Oscar baity, especially if you are comparing it to movies like Brokeback Mountain. But it didn't get a lot of awards for sure, but it didn't receive a lot of chatter out of Cannes. I didn't really hear a ton of people talking about it, honestly. So that one it's still on my radar, but I don't think that one gained any momentum from the Cannes Film Festival, even though I am very, very excited to see it. It's also sitting a little bit lower. Much like I said earlier with Eddington, it sits around a 68% currently on Rotten Tomatoes. Speaking of Josh O'Connor, he also stars in Kelly Reichardt's The Mastermind, which is the last film I really want to touch on this video, because I do have high hopes for that film and really high hopes for Reichardt. She's long overdue for some Academy recognition, but I just don't know that it's going to happen with this one. There's been mixed reviews for that one too, although it is sitting a little bit higher on Rotten Tomatoes at 86%. Which is a good score and does still leave it on my radar. It's not something I'm going to eliminate completely. I do think that it could be a possibility for her as director, for the film, for screenplay, especially for Josh O'Connor, for John Magaro, who is also in this film, and I heard in a supporting role that's pretty juicy. So I'm leaving The Mastermind on my radar, but I was hoping the Cannes Film Festival would really boost it up in terms of like, I feel really, really good about this now, but it just kind of stayed stagnant as to where it was. I'm not taking it out of the picture completely, but I just wish we'd gotten a little more love for it to kind of make it a little more popular amongst the early prediction. We also had huge premieres at the Cannes Film Festival for Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, with of course Tom Cruise hanging off of shit like airplanes. That premiered here in the US and I saw it. It's not an Oscars player, although it could definitely be in the mix for things like sound design, visual effects, so always keep those in mind when it comes to those technical categories. And The Phoenician Scheme from Wes Anderson, his new film that's going to be released here nationwide this week coming up, but it did premiere at the Cannes Film Festival to pretty mixed reviews. Most people said, if you like Wes Anderson, you'll like this. It's basically a patented Wes Anderson movie. With that being said, I don't think it's an Academy player. I think he is going to have to do something different or unique. It might still have that Anderson feel to it, but it's going to have to come with like a really powerful performance that stands out among all the others that year, or some kind of interesting score, or something that's really going to have to make it stand out from the other Wes Anderson filmography, because it's at a point where been there, done that with his stuff. And I'm not saying I dislike it or whatever, it just is what it is. The Academy is going to see his movies and go, well, this is the same movie with just a different story or setting. So for that reason, I don't expect The Phoenician Scheme to be a huge player this award season. That's basically it for my coverage of the Cannes Film Festival, guys. I've been trying to sneak in this recording because I'm home Memorial Day weekend with my kids. You can probably hear them screaming in the background. But the big winners for me in my power rankings and in my predictions going forward are the ones that I kind of started this video out with, which would be Sentimental Value for sure, Die My Love, I think as a player. The Secret Agent could transcend into the Best Picture race, but it's definitely in the International Feature race, and possibly even for Wagner Moura, a la Fernando Torres for I'm Still Here. I also feel really good about It Was Just an Accident, since it's being distributed by Neon and ended up winning the Palme d'Or, which that trio of Oscar nomination, Neon Studios, Palme d'Or often go together. There's only one year that it didn't. So I feel really good about that one too. And if it doesn't make Best Picture, it's also like The Secret Agent, where I think it's a pretty good option for International Feature. I hate doing shoe-ins or like predictions, because I mean, who knows? We don't know. But the Cannes Film Festival does creak the door open just a little bit for the first time every year, and it's always very exciting to see what happens. I want to know down below which of the Cannes films that premiered this year that you've heard about, or maybe if you were there and you saw it, that I didn't mention that you think is definitely going to be in the awards conversation. Please let me know down below. If you love movies and you love award season for sure, you should be subscribed to this channel. And if you are a regular to the channel, do not forget that memberships are open. All you have to do is click join down below, and for like $3 a month, you can help me support myself out here in the garage talking about films. The Cannes Film Festival has wrapped up, and I'll be back soon with my updated power rankings, so stick around for that too. We're counting our way down to the next Academy Awards. I'll see you guys out here next time in the garage.